Your genetic power is the most awesome force the planet's ever seen, but you wield it like a kid that's found his dad's gun. You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could, and before you even knew what you had, you patented it and packaged it and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, and now you're selling it. You want to sell it.
And you thought the franchise had a definitive end. We all know that's not how things work in Hollywood. By all accounts, Alien Cubed should have been the end. Just like Aliens should have been the end, and just like Alien should have been the end. However, not many people could imagine it moving forward after the protagonist was killed off. The solution? Cloning. Taking place 200 years after the previous film, Ripley is cloned so that the alien inside her can be extracted. If you remember, Ripley was impregnated, and a group of military scientists are trying to extract the embryo of the Queen. Yep, they're still trying to get the xenomorph for their own purposes. As a result, the Ripley clone is imbued with enhanced strength, acidic blood, and some sort of link with the aliens. In addition, a group of mercenaries enter the research station with some kidnapped humans that the scientists want to use as hosts. As you would predict, things go wrong, prompting the new Ripley to team up with the mercenaries in order to wipe out the xenomorphs once and for all. As you'd probably guess, the premise requires sizable suspension of disbelief, even by this series' standards. The cloning angle seems like a cheap way to continue the franchise and make more money, which becomes all the more apparent when you realize that the narrative structure is all too familiar. However, considering the type of movie that they wanted to make, Alien Resurrection actually comes off a bit better than Alien Cubed. It's not good, but the filmmakers were aiming for a popcorn flick, and they mostly accomplished that more than Alien 3 did when it tried to be thought-provoking. This fourth entry is endlessly silly. Everything in it is just so over the top, starting with the characters. Ripley is noticeably colder and at times sensual in her deliveries this time around, almost like she's not human. Sigourney Weaver does her best, but the radically different personality and handful of goofier moments prevent us from identifying with her like we could before. Winona Ryder tries to push the intensity as Call, but she feels miscast. It's like whenever Scarlett Johansson tries to be intimidating and dangerous, instead coming off as pouty. Granted, Ryder is far more talented than Johansson, but her efforts here can't overcome the fact that she just feels out of place. The rest of the characters feel like cartoons. Subtlety was clearly not in the repertoire here. If you need proof, just look at Brad Dourif as one of the scientists. He's as weird as you'd expect, hamming it up nearly every chance he gets. The same goes for Dan Hedaya as the general, albeit to a lesser extreme. The mercenaries aren't much better. Michael Wincott is mildly amusing as the roguish captain. Ron Perlman provides some fun in his short-tempered demeanor. Dominique Swain occasionally makes for a chuckle or two in his sardonic antics. And Gary Dowerden is likable enough in his loyalty, which is unfortunately one of his only character traits. The exaggerated style doesn't stop at the characters. The cinematography is also over the top, with the camera nearly always moving and often going in for some goofy close-ups. This technique, combined with the overacting, makes it impossible to engage the film on any serious level. In addition, a great deal of that can be attributed to the asinine script. Anyone who thinks that Joss Whedon is some geek god who can do no wrong need only look at this movie to see otherwise. Disregarding the plot holes, it's filled with corny action cliches and bad one-liners. The effects are mostly hit or miss. Some of the practical ones, such as the caged xenomorphs, look pretty convincing and are a reminder of one area where this series has mostly always shined. The CGI, however, looks extremely dated and cheesy. The sets are also a mixed bag, with many of them being competently built, but unfortunately undermined by the limited color and depressing lighting scheme. None of them pop like the ones in the other movies. The music by John Frizzell is surprisingly good, harkening back to the eerie sounds of Jerry Goldsmith, though not nearly as accomplished or nuanced. The same goes for the ideas presented. The concept of splicing human and alien DNA can potentially be very intriguing, and it lends itself to some pretty memorable new designs. However, the idea is mostly wasted, constantly being used simply to provide an obstacle for the characters and never really being explored in depth. Overall, Alien Resurrection does bring some interesting ideas to the table that may have made for a fascinating follow-up, but it instead resorts to familiar formulas and ends up a mixed bag because of it. I did find it more entertaining than Alien Cubed, mostly because there is some dumb fun to be had if you're only looking for a goofy, tongue-in-cheek action movie. The problem is that, narratively, the franchise feels too tired and recycled at this point to really justify this so-called resurrection.